Hey everyone, welcome to the 251st episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode is brought to you by patrons Nathan Bailey, David Redman, and Matt Mendoza. I'm Warren Kaplan.
And I'm Matt Enlow. Today we've got Stephen Koepfer on the show. Stephen is an experienced martial artist who's making his way in the world of stunts. He's a stunt performer in a ton of things that you have seen and love and know. Everything from John Wick 3 all the way down to Devs. We dive into a bunch of that stuff. And he's also dipping his toe into the very early stages of learning how to become a stunt coordinator. And so we've got a wonderful breadth of knowledge. He's, like I said, an experienced martial artist, which is kind of the way that he gets into stunts, but also, is doing the classic thing that I think that all filmmakers, whatever role you're playing, where you do the kind of the more junior roles on the big jobs, and then you kind of start figuring things out a little bit more on the smaller jobs as well. So he's got a really interesting perspective, and we haven't talked about stunts in any meaningful way on the show before. We're 251 episodes in, and this is the first time we're talking about stunts, really. I think it's a great primer if you're curious about action, if you're curious about stunt driving. There's so many different disciplines, so we kind of scrape the surface on a lot of different things.
And one of the cool things about Stephen is he was also in the movie Save Yourselves, whose directors we had on the podcast in the past. And I kind of wonder if that's how he found out about us.
Perhaps. We never asked him. We should have.
Yeah. Also Ray Donovan, The Blacklist, Madam Secretary, Hobo with the High Kick. He was the fight coordinator on that. Blind Spot.
He also doubled for my friend Tim Guinea, which I meant to talk to him about. So, Steve, if you're listening, drop us a line again.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, what I kind of love about Stephen's story is that stunts is not his first job. You think a lot of physical types of jobs as something that you would be training for your whole life, that you work to be a stunt person or a stunt performer. And Stephen was a master in this martial arts form called Sambo, which is a Russian style of martial arts. And because he was a specialist in that, that's what pulled him into the John Wick movies, and he met the director, and it really brought him into that stunt performer world kind of later in life. So to me, I love hearing of stories of people that are in their 30s and their 40s. They're just getting into film at that age because it's inspiring. A lot of times this is an industry that rewards the youth, and it's nice to hear stories of people that are not in their early 20s getting breaks and finding their way in the industry. So that's really a big part of what I appreciate here. But before we speak to Stephen, I would like to know, Matt, what have you been working on lately?
Yeah, I thought that we could have a good little conversation about follow-up technique, because I am in the situation, for people who've been following the show recently, I've been sending a screenplay out to a handful of confidants and friends, and I'm in that zone where I'm asking for notes or more like strategy or like introductions, things like that. A handful of people are reading it, and I almost texted you, but I thought, we'll just talk about it on the show. How long do you wait before you follow up with someone to check in and see if what they thought of your screenplay, or if they have any new news or anything like that?
Yeah, well, so I find that oftentimes when I do send someone something to read or listen to or watch, they will give me some sort of indication as to when they think they're going to do it. So if they're like, oh yeah, I'll try to get to this weekend, then I would probably wait till like Tuesday afternoon and say, hey, just checking in. If they don't give me an indication, I'd probably wait at the very least a week.
Does the runtime or length play into that decision-making process at all?
For sure. I guess I'm trying to talk about a feature script. I think a feature script is just, it takes a really long time to read. If I sent someone like a 30-second cut of a commercial and said, hey, what do you think of this? I wouldn't mind bugging them, because they could literally just watch it when they get my reminder email and respond to me.
Yeah. The difference being you have to like carve out some time to read a screenplay. You can't just do it flippantly real quick, like at lunch or something like that. You have to be like, okay, I'm going to, read this.
Yeah. Well, I think there's some obvious no-nos that we've seen happen a lot, which is a lot of times someone will send out a script and then 3 days later they'll say, hey, if you haven't read that one yet, read this one. And they'll just And that's the dead giveaway, that you've sent them the script too early and you're wasting their time because you're literally changing it and doing things as they're reading it, which kind of devalues their notes and whatnot.
The problem with that, the bummer with that, is that like as soon as I send something, and I'm sure everyone can relate, as soon as I send something, I realize like, oh, there's a couple things I would change.
Yep.
Well, let me just tweet like, and it doesn't matter how many times I can read it 100 times. I can be like, I love this. This is perfect. I should carve it in granite, in marble. Let's get the tablet out because this is perfect. And then as soon as I send it out, I was like, oh shoot, that apostrophe shouldn't be there.
Right. That's why I think, as dumb as it sounds, sometimes I'll try to send a Dropbox link or something. I mean, with Vimeo, with Dropbox, it kind of doesn't work really anymore that well. But with Vimeo, I do that all the time. I'll send someone a video and I'll be like, this cut can be a little better. And I'll just replace the file before, hoping to get it before they watch it. But yeah, it is tricky. That is the thing I think everyone on Twitter, people talk about all the time. Like, I spelled my name wrong on the cover page, and I always catch it right after I hit send. But yeah, I think for a feature, and again, it probably depends on the time of year, it depends how busy things are, it depends all that stuff. I think if you're talking about managers, probably a week for a reminder, and then if you don't hear back again, maybe one more check-in a week later, and then that's it. No more check-in.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah.
I told you I had a frame of reference, and I don't think it will be very satisfying to you. But I have gotten, actually, one of our listeners recently emailed me a lookbook, mood book for a project, and they said to me, this was about a week ago, and they said, hey, I've heard you talk on the podcast about that you are happy to give feedback and look at things. Do you mind if I send you like a lookbook for this movie that I'm pitching and working on to get your opinion? And I wrote back and I said, yeah, if I have time, I'll definitely check it out, send it over. And this person sent it over, and I still have not looked at it. I kind of, flipped through it for a few seconds just to kind of get an idea of what it looks like, but I haven't read anything yet. And it's been about a week, and I was thinking of maybe trying to read it tonight. But if that person emailed me like right now and said, hey, just wondering if you got a chance to look at it, it would definitely affect how fast I got to it. Because right now, I might read it tonight. I'll probably, read the news and go to sleep instead. But I do think those reminder emails are effective.
They are effective. You know what's tricky? Because I think your point is right. Whether it's managers or producers or friends, you kind of have a different expectation or hope from all of them. Like if you're a development executive, it's really tricky because your job is to read. The phrase weekend read is specifically for those people because, they're going to spend their Saturdays and Sundays, reading the first 10 and last 10 pages of a bunch of screenplays. You know what I mean? It's complicated because it's like, I know they've got to read 10 screenplays on Saturday or whatever the number is, right? So being number 11, I don't mind if it takes me a couple weeks. I just want it to get read and to get some feedback, What I really want is for them to love it and respond accordingly. And I would hate to be like, hey, read my screenplay. And then that puts a bad taste in their mouth. And all of a sudden, they're just getting it over with.
I don't think one check-in puts a bad taste in their mouth. I think it just reminds us all why the first 10 pages have to be, knock them out of the park. Why it's always great to say, hey, Charlize Theron's people have read this and they like it. What do you think? Like anything that can bump it from spot number 11 to spot number 1 or 2, or even just read the first 10 pages, or whoever is sending it to this manager saying like, oh, you got to read this. That makes all the difference.
I think this is the perfect match for you. Yeah.
So, when you don't have that, when it's just like, hey, my friend's a writer-director, he's done this, here are his credits, he is looking to have some people read a script, would you read it? I do think it requires a little nudging sometimes, especially if these are good people, which I know the people you send your script to, and they probably have a lot of scripts to read, and I'm sure they are just as susceptible to what's going on in the news as the rest of us.
What a fun time to be sending something out. Yeah. I think the other thing, just in talking it through with you, that's worth thinking about is when in the week it's sent. You know, I know that sounds a little crazy, but like basically you got to give them a weekend or two, basically. If you're assuming that that's when they're doing all of their reading, then, and you sent it to them on a like late in the week, then maybe you want to follow up midweek after their second weekend. I feel like is maybe that's too late. I don't know. I'm overthinking it, obviously, but that's the nature of a podcast. Our job is
to overthink things. I'm in a similar, not as stressful situation, but you know, I've been working on this scripted podcast. I made a pilot with a friend. It was produced by this guy I know who's a podcast producer. He just did a podcast for Tenderfoot. Now there's talk about it being turned into a TV show with some really high level producers. So he has some heat. He has some really good reps. I think some agents at ICM, and he's working with this agent at UTA. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to finish. He kept pressuring me to finish this thing so he could send it to the agent at UTA. Finally, I did. He sent it 2 weeks ago. It was kind of radio silence for a week. And finally, I had to bug the producer guy and say, hey, did you hear from the agent? And he's like, yeah, let me check in with him tomorrow. He checks in with him tomorrow. The agent says, hey, I'm going to have Monica like listen to this. She works more in this scripted stuff. I do more non-scripted stuff. And Monica writes back, ooh, I'm so excited to listen to this. This was like a week ago. So and today I got a call from my partner, Julie, on the project. I haven't talked to her. She left me a message like, hey, what's going on? So it's like, she's going to ask me what's going on. I'm going to ask Doug what's going on. He's going to ask that agent what's going on. And so, you know, I don't know. It's like, no matter how fast you're going and how much someone's like, I'm going to read this tonight and tell you tomorrow.
Yeah, they can't wait.
It's just not going to happen. So yeah, it's part of the reason that you got to make your project as compelling as possible, and B, you have to be firing on all cylinders. Not only have that project be going on like 5 different paths, at least at this stage, but also have 5 other projects that are going on things. So hopefully, as things cascade, you have...
Not all of those eggs are in a single basket.
Yeah, I actually haven't even sent my thing to my manager yet because I'm waiting to hear about this agent first. So it's like... Yeah,
well, and that's the other thing that two things. One, what you just described, I think, is so common, and just the speed at which things move until you get some heat, until you like an attachment that like pulls their attention or something like that. Because all of those Audible's got a show with an SNL alum or whatever, that's going to take precedence at UTA over this fresher, different show that you're pitching, right? For instance. So like, it just takes a while, right? Which is why it feels like, oh, you sprint so hard, and then all of a sudden it just feels like it's slow motion, and it takes 3 years to get anything done. You're like, this is why.
And so this is what, just to reveal behind the curtain, what I'm going to do is tomorrow I'm going to call this producer that I worked with first and say, hey, should I just show this to my manager because we're not hearing back from your agent? He's going to say, no, let me bug the agent. Then I'm going to call Julie and say, hey, I left a message for Doug. He's going to find out from this agent if the other agent has listened to it yet. So it's just like you're pushing levers.
A little bit of mind games is really good. But I was going to say the thing that I do like about having a third party, in this case your producer, sometimes it's an agent, sometimes it's a manager. It's nice to just like be like, oh, okay, I'm like the sensitive artist. I'm going to bug them. They're a filter. They're a barrier between the person you want to reach out to and yourself. Like they're stopping you from like pinging someone too many times. If I pinged every actor or producer or agent or manager that I wanted to, every time I had the thought like, oh, I wonder if they've read it yet, there wouldn't be a person in town that would work with me because I would be so annoying. I would ping somebody basically every 15 minutes until they get back to me.
Yeah. There is that power move, which like does not work 9 out of 10 times, but it's basically what I'm saying I'm going to try to do tomorrow, which is saying like, hey, I don't know if you read the script yet, but this other person is really interested in it. So should I just assume you're passing,
Yeah.
It almost never works because they'll just pass on. And it's an easy out for them.
I think I know the answer to what I'm about to ask you, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Do you kind of, when you're sending something out, do you categorize them? Do you say, okay, I'm going to go to agents and managers first because, if they sign on board, then it makes producers a lot easier. And then if I get producers, then it makes talent a lot easier. Like, is there a pecking order, or do you just kind of think of all of the people that would be right to send this to and just kind of reach out to all of them simultaneously?
I guess I kind of aim for the lowest hanging fruit first, like the person that either I've told about this and has shown some interest. Like we both talked to a producer that has worked on converting podcasts to TV shows, and we, it seemed like natural to reach out to her, on something like this. When the low hanging fruit doesn't bear more fruit, then, I'll go to someone who seems like a right match, but I tend to, or someone that's expressed interest, or someone that is easy for me to talk to, like a dad from my daughter's preschool is easier for me to reach out to than like someone I met at Sundance 8 years ago, or even someone that's been on our podcast. So yeah, I kind of try the easy routes first because I am desperate for validation. But
know what? It's the hard part is that, like, I feel like sometimes I set up dominoes for myself, where I'm just part of the reason why I'm anxious for them to get a quick no or a quick yes is so that I can move on to the next stage. Like if it's like, okay, like every single agent and manager I know isn't interested. Great. Okay. Then I can move on to the next phase. But it doesn't make sense to do that until, I don't know, that's too much of the Enlow neurosis. But
yeah, I am kind of, obviously this about me, and I think maybe it comes out on the podcast or maybe it doesn't, but I am more of the ask for forgiveness than ask for permission type of person. I would, if it wasn't so against Hollywood rules, I would maybe send a script out to multiple actors at the same time to see who's interested, even though you're not supposed to do that. I think with managers and agents and production companies, it's a little less of a rule, but still expected sometimes.
Sure. Yeah, certainly. It's more, it's like, oh, if someone says yes, then it makes the next step easier. So I don't want to like for just as a hypothetical, a manager's reading it and they have a really good relationship with the production company that I would love to partner with. Right. So I could cold call that production company right now, or even get like a decent introduction from a friend or something like that. Or I could wait, see if the manager wants to come on rep the movie, and then go to them with a stronger recommendation. Intellectually, I know that that's the smarter move, but the impatient part of me feels like, oh, I'm just wasting time. And it is. We've both been in the situation where you just kind of, you send it out to people and you wait for it to hear back, and then you send it out to more people, and then the thing just never happens because people lose interest, or it fiddles away, or you can't get people to sign on, right?
Yeah. I'm going to try to tell you a really quick story, even though I know this intro is dragging on forever. But my friend and I, one time we tried to start this company that makes viral videos for companies, branded videos way back in the day, like 2006. And we had this idea. We had this friend that made this video called Shoes that went viral. Shoes. And we said, oh, maybe let's contact some shoe companies and see if they want us to have him make a video for them as this like branded content thing. And this was kind of at the dawn of branded
Let's
video.
Get some Reeboks.
So my friend,
let's get some Nikes.
Yeah, he went to Anderson Business School, the UCLA Business School, and he said, as a student there, I get a directory of all the grads here. So we went to the website. This top, not secret, but like you have to be a member of the school to access it. Here's a list of all these alumni from the school and where they work and what their position is. So we looked for all the CMOs, the chief marketing officers.
Which you could probably do on LinkedIn now.
Yeah, that's totally true. And we found all the ones that worked at shoe companies. So we found one woman that was, I don't even know if she was a CMO. She might have just been in the marketing department at K-Swiss. So we emailed her and we said, hey, we are starting a new business. Anderson students, go Bruins, whatever, alumni. We have this company that is a viral branded marketing, and we have this great idea for shoes. Who should we talk to? And she wrote back, she's like, oh, that sounds interesting. You should talk to so-and-so. So we emailed so-and-so and we said, hey, Susan told us we need to talk to you about this thing. We both went to Anderson. We have this business idea. Anyway, we got a meeting with the CMO of K-Swiss. And we went in there, we pitched our whole thing, and he was like, I could just put a commercial on during a Lakers game and get 5 million eyeballs on it. Why would I do this viral thing? That sounds dumb. Anyway, the point is we had zero connections And we, aside from one of us being a student at the time, and we leveraged...
Sure, but I hear what you were saying. My point, I think, is that I know how to source and reach out to and get an introduction to any company I want, more or less. But I know that in Hollywood, the value of someone vouching for you and the relationship that that person has, once you have somebody on your team, on the team of the movie, repping this movie, that value is much greater than, that has the oomph to maybe make this a reality in a way that...
Right, but if you are, let's say you're talking to a manager at Circle of Confusion, and you think Lonely Island is a great company to make your movie, and you just send him, your plan A is like, I'm going to send this manager my script, I'm going to have him read it. If he likes it, hopefully he can send it to Lonely Island. And that's kind of...
So that doesn't work, right?
The leveraging thing is, I'm saying, is like, oh, you kind of know someone that worked at Lonely Island, so now you say to this manager at Circle of Confusion or whatever, like, hey, by the way, I know Monica at Lonely Island, and I think that would be a great fit for this. Like, do you want to read it? And even if Monica, like, who knows what she does there, but she's there, and then you happen to run into Monica at a party, and you say, hey, yeah, actually... I know so-and-so at Circle and Confusion, like, worked with you on some other projects. He's actually reading the script right now. You triangulating things is super helpful.
Orchestrating things, and it's not a little bit more,
It's not, like, deceitful, but it's kind of demonstrating that you understand how the pieces fit together without saying, like, please show me how you can fit this together with something else.
That's interesting. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, yeah.
And it is different than my K-Swiss example, which is literally, like, risky, like Michael J. Foxing your way to the top.
I mean, even if the thing is that you just know, if you getting in the room is only half the battle. Like, as a person who's taken plenty of pitches, the difference between me and one other lower level executive going in and taking a pitch, and then Chris Rock coming in and taking a pitch, and the room is full of 15 executives, there's a stark difference. And like, the reputation and the connections that a project has determines how many decision makers are going to be in the room at any given time.
Right. And in one room, you go into the pitch as a listener wanting to like it and wanting to buy it. And in the other one, you're going in wondering when you can get to lunch.
Yeah. Or like, why didn't I give this to Enlo? He's the sucker who would have taken this pitch, and I wouldn't have had to do it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's the balance.
Well, hopefully you reach out. What is it? It's Tuesday today. Maybe by the end of the week.
Today. Yeah, maybe. I think maybe.
I'm going to reach out to my person tomorrow, but again, it's like he's a low-hanging fruit person, so it's easy for me. Before we talk to Stephen, just want to remind you all that we have a Patreon page, patreon.com/justshootitpod. There might be perks on there. There might not be. For $10, you will definitely get a hat.
There's certainly perks.
For $4, you will get a sticker.
Oren's working on some super secret, very cool perks.
I'm working on things.
In addition,
Matt keeps bringing up the legal questionability of me putting them on there, but I think it's better to ask for forgiveness than for permission.
Tasteful nudes is what we're talking about.
No, but yeah, thanks for all our patrons. We very much appreciate you, and you do help this podcast keep going. So check it out, patreon.com/justshootitpod. At the $20 level, we have t-shirts. $10, we got hats. $4, you get a sticker. You'll be the coolest kid at your school. Don't put the Just Shoot It sticker on your laptop at school, right? Is that a bad thing?
I think it's, well, I don't know. Schools are tricky.
We are not legally allowed to advise on that topic. But we appreciate you all. Here's Stephen Koepfer. Your first stunt was, what, you got shot on CSI?
No, Blacklist, yeah.
Blacklist.
Oh, yeah.
Were there squibs involved or no?
No, there were no squibs. It was all just, done in post. Although we did have live rounds, like New York rounds, blanks. So those are designed to give a longer and brighter muzzle flash. The safety distance is about 6 feet. The muzzle flash goes about 6 feet. So you got to stay outside of that diameter or you're going to get burned.
It's funny. Nowadays, I do like a VFX, a lot of VFX, and I've added many a muzzle flash to things. But I have shot with blanks a couple times. I did that Lifetime movie with Lori Loughlin where she was swinging around a gun with blanks in it. Talk about a scary mom.
It is scary. but it's fun. It's the first time you do it. I mean, I've fired a lot of real guns, but the first time I fired blanks, it's kind of shocking how little blowback and how little feeling there is.
That's interesting. So I want to dig into just the whole business of stunt performing, but I do actually have a question about the blowback on guns that you were talking about before. Do you find that actors, because they maybe haven't fired live rounds before, that they're not acting properly when they're shooting a gun with blanks? Do you know what I mean? If there should be more kickback, like,
yeah,
does
the
it make
kickback
them?
is important.
Yeah.
Not just actors, stunt people too. You know, I mean, we'll just include stunt performers in the global actor category, but yeah, you have to mimic the kickback accurately. You know, it's on a horizontal plane. You see a lot of people who don't know what they're doing, kind of like the barrel points up into the air, or they don't really show the recoil in their body.
So when you say it's on a horizontal plane, you mean that like it's pushing back towards
you.
Basically.
Yeah. So if you're aiming straight ahead of you, your shoulder should retract a little bit, right? So your arm moves backwards rather than just standing there like there's no physics happening there.
Sure, no force pushing you back. Yeah, that's really fascinating. Well, let's rewind just a tiny bit, because Oren, you had mentioned, Steve, you've both performed as a stunt performer, and then also there were a couple other terms that you threw around. Can you just kind of walk us through the hierarchy of all of the jobs and which ones you like to do best, basically? But kind of give us lay the land out for us.
Yeah. So, I mean, within the industry, within the department, let's just say, there's your general stunt performer. The top of the food chain is the coordinator, the stunt coordinator. You guys had mentioned that I coordinated a little bit, but I definitely don't consider myself a coordinator. I don't really, I've coordinated a few student films and some web series, like little things that I feel are within my scope.
The same way a camera operator or a cinematographer or a director, you may be kind of on the bigger shows, you take maybe a more junior role, and on the smaller shows, you can go ahead and kind of, spread your wings a little bit. That makes sense.
So the stunt coordinator is a department head. So he's really coordinating, right? And and he's responsible for the safety of not just all the performers, but also everybody else on set, particularly if there's dangerous stunts going on. And beneath the coordinator, you would have obviously performers. You might also have stunt riggers. So for people listening that might not be aware, the riggers are the people that set up all the wire work. They'll break down all the physics and set up the trusses and make sure that, nobody's going to fall, the wire's not going to snap. They're going to do that whole process.
Right. They take out like the calculator and they're like, how much do you weigh? No, really, how much do you weigh?
There's a really
Don't
great
make
app.
me get the scale out.
There's a really great app that you guys should stick on your phones. It's called RigRight. And,
okay. Yeah, that's great.
You can just point at a set, and then over the camera, it'll lay out all the physics, and you can measure angles and stuff like that. It's a pretty good tool to have on the phone.
So if you want somebody to swing from one place to another, you can kind of show the angle that you want to see it from, and then put like a starting and ending point or something.
Yep. If you need to do the math, you can take the picture of it and do it right on top of the picture. It's pretty cool. So yeah, you could have a rigger. If there's fire burns, they might bring in a specialist who's dealing with fire. You might have a driving coordinator. So who's underneath the stunt coordinator depends on the scene, honestly. It could be a fight guy, which is pretty much what I am. I'm a fight guy that falls well. So there's as many expertises as you can think of. And most of us get into the business for having some kind of skill that we do better than most people. For instance, like for me, it's Sambo, which is the Russian style of martial art that I do, which is kind of rare, right? But I know guys that, like, when I was on Devs, I worked on Devs, and one of the riggers, his name is Eddie Fiola. So his first movie that he got into the business in was Rad, because he's like
cool
BMX guy. He's literally the guy.
Totally rad. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
Created freestyle BMX, basically, right? But over the years, he, like most of us, in order to survive, you have to expand your skill set. So he was one of the riggers that I was working with on that show. But so everybody will get something, that hopefully that has something to get them in the door, like maybe you're a pro skateboarder, a race car driver, something like that.
Right. Someone who's really good at stapling their nuts to their leg or something.
Jackass. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many jobs you get doing that, but you might get one, But
Yeah, all
that's
you
kind
need.
of like that's all the expertise. You'll get something that gets you in the door, but then you're not always going to get a job doing that. So now it's about going to school and spending money and learning and, getting all those other skills up to snuff so you can contribute in lots of different ways. So you'll have like under the stunt coordinator, you'll have any one of those people, then you'll have performers, and then usually you might have what's called somebody utility stunts. And utility stunts are basically performers, rigger, like someone who you can put different hats on. Like they're not hired for
Like a swing.
Yeah, yeah. They're not hired for a specific thing per se. They're there to fill whatever, to help out in whatever needs helping. It could be safety, it could be rigging, it could be driving, It's somebody who can change hats.
And so would a person like that, a utility person, are they typically on smaller sets, or is that a luxury for bigger sets where it's like, okay, well, we got all of our different department heads and we're going to have 6 utility guys to share amongst the department or whatever? Or is it more like, oh, we've got one utility guy to take care of everything?
It depends on the project. Like if you're on something, like a Fast and Furious, you're going to have a much bigger stunt crew, right? If you're on something like Save Yourselves, there's very, very few people involved because there's very few stunts, So it depends on what you need done. Maybe it depends on also like second unit. How big is the second unit? Like, are you doing everything twice? Do you need twice as many people? Things like that. Like I've only had one utility stunt contract in 4 years, and that was on Punisher for Netflix. But everything else has been either doubling or performing or playing a character that gets killed or something like that.
Have you ever fallen off a building?
No.
Is that a specialty?
Yeah, high falls are definitely a specialty. So, and that's one of the stunts that you see less of now with CGI and green screens and stuff. So like just for definition, let's just say like high falls, something over 20 feet, If you're doing like a 15-foot fall in front of a green screen, then they can put you on any elevation they want in post-production. Like Assassin's Creed, the movie that just came out, had actual high fall. That was like
Very, their
very
marketing. It was like
Yeah,
Mission Impossible
exactly.
style, right? They're like, hey, check out this crazy stunt we did.
But there's ways to cheat it. Like in the first Spider-Man, like the Amazing Spider-Man, there was a scene where a guy falls out the window, and they built a room inside another room. So they built the replica of the room on tracks inside the room of the building, right? So if you can visualize this, the room where the fight was going on was slowly moving towards the actual window. Like, so the two windows would mirror each other. The stunt person goes out the room on the window of the room on tracks and quickly gets out of the way. And by the time the other person who threw him out the window gets to the window to look down at the sidewalk, the two windows have lined up flush, and he's actually looking down to another actor who's just laying on the ground, right? So it's a complete cheat. I know there are a lot of coordinators and filmmakers who don't like high falls because they can interrupt the flow of a scene. Like you have to wait. But yeah, it's definitely a specialty. So if you're going to have a high fall in there, you want somebody who's very experienced and good at doing it.
Have you ever been thrown through a glass window?
No, there's so many things on my bucket list. Like I haven't been set on fire yet.
Have you been hit by a car?
No, I haven't been hit by a car. You could go your whole career just do it. Like I told you, most of what I do is fighting, falling.
Right. So they're calling you to take a punch, not to get hit by a car. Yeah, yeah.
Or if it's like a sequence where there's like an assassin, right? And there's like 50 punches and kicks.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
blocks
totally.
and...
Not that they wouldn't call me to get hit by a car, but I just have, I've been a stunt performer, like I'd say, for about 5 years. So it just takes time.
So you're relatively new.
I mean, my first time working in television was not as stunts, and it's been a lot longer than that. But in stunts, it's been about 5 years, maybe a little longer. I'd say from 2014 is when I made the decision to do that. So.
Well, and let me ask then, what was the impetus? What was the deciding factor for you to say, hey, I'm pretty good at taking a fall. Let's do this professionally.
Well, it's funny because it's one of those things, like from childhood, I always wanted to be involved in this business. From early on, I was playing, my father had a Super 8 camera, and I was always making movies with that. And then even as a child, I went to camp, like filmmaking camp, and learned how to edit on big Betamax decks and stuff. And like, I would go every summer and we would go from script to screen. We would make movies. And it was with all the film students at New York Institute of Technology out in New York. So I imagine the counselors were the film students. And then I went to School of Visual Arts for college on a full scholarship. And my plan was to get into movies, but I always wanted to be like behind the camera. Like my library, everything growing up was like behind the scenes of Star Wars, behind the scenes of this, like Rick Baker.
Like as a director?
No, I was interested in effects, like special effects and like choreography and like all that stuff. And I knew what stunts were. I knew there was this thing called a stunt guy, but
I think that's one of the rare crew positions that people know about, like mainstream people know about, like most people don't know what a grip or a gaffer does.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Everyone knows what a stunt performer does.
I think there is, though. It's interesting that, Steve, you bring up your interest in kind of like practical effects and movie magic, because to me, the thing that people don't understand about stunts is all of how technical it is, basically. Not just, look, you're talking about like, oh, let me recommend this great app that does the math for you. But like, there's a ton of rigging and hiding things, and it's really like more like dancing than it is a bunch of tough guys. And like, yeah, everybody has to be tough and like, a little crazy to do some of the things that you guys do. But there's like, it's not pure machismo. There's a lot of technical prowess and ability and experience behind it that is quite nerdy, in the same way that like model making and rigging and all of those other effects that you as a kid were so interested by. Like there's to me there's a very clear intersection between the two.
It's a hugely technical department, and not only that, but like everybody on a production, you're working very closely with other departments, especially on the big budget things like VFX and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's like something as a director, just to like zoom out from stunts for a second, that a lot of times I think it's intimidating. Maybe you're someone that doesn't know a lot about visual effects, or you haven't done a lot of fight sequences, or you've never done, like you're doing a scene that takes place at the horse racing track and you don't know how horse racing exactly works. Like I think a lot of people don't realize like you could just call someone that's an expert at that thing and not just interview them, but you can actually bring them to set and say like, hey, help me make this look real,
Yeah. There's like an expectation that you are competent in a lot of things, but specialists in particular know that you're not a martial arts expert necessarily, for instance, or you're not, a genius when it comes to wardrobe or whatever, like you have to be conversant in things. And it's really helpful to do your homework and to learn as much as you can. But it's also about showing respect to the people who have devoted their lives to the very specific thing that you were asking them to advise you on. And so like, I think young directors are oftentimes worried that they're not going to come off as knowledgeable, and so they pretend that they know things that they don't know. And that is the best way to look like an asshole in front of your entire crew. And once you lose that respect, it's really, really hard to bring it back, for sure. Whereas if you were like, hey, Steve, this is really your domain. This is what I'm thinking. This is my thought starter. Let's work on it together. Then you're showing your appreciation to everyone and showing that you respect their safety and their time and their expertise. And especially with stunts, like, safety is not something that's taken lightly.
But it's also interesting that the more experienced the director is, the more they're willing to trust other people sometimes. I made a movie about a UFC fighter, and there's a scene where they're in the hospital where Matt Hamill's with his grandfather, who's not doing so well. He has some lung issues, and they're sitting down, and it's like this emotional scene, whatever. And, we got this access to this hospital at, whatever, RAT or some university we were filming at. And I was like, this room looks great. And I love the doors and I love the angles, and let's film here. And they have whatever. We shoot this whole thing. And then we premiere the movie. And I have all my roommates from college are all doctors. And I invited them. And I was like, what'd you think? They're like, oh, we loved it and everything. Really great. I mean, the one thing is during that hospital scene, like he's in an exam room, and like what he would not be in an exam room, just everything medically was kind of totally wrong. Like in terms of just the type of hospital room, he was in. But I think at the time when I was doing that movie, I was like, not even, maybe I was too proud, right? It never even occurred to me to like ask a medical professional like how to set the scene up, because I'd seen so many movies where there's scenes in hospitals. It never occurred to me that I didn't know what I was doing. And I think that's like one of the signs of like a younger director, is these kind of like slightly inauthentic scenes, because they don't want to ask other people for help on things like that.
And the flip side is, it's okay for you to be, if you had asked your friends, for instance, to come to set those days, and they could be like, hey, this is wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. It's okay for you to be like, hey, you know what? We've got 15 minutes to get this scene, and I'm going to be wrong on this case because it's important to the story, and that's not a big deal. Like knowing that you're making that mistake is a significant difference than like accidentally making the mistake. Sometimes you're going to make decisions just because production is hard. Like similarly, my wife's side of the family, they're all lawyers. And my sister-in-law is always like rolling her eyes at legal scenes. And I always tease her because I'm like, look, if you made an authentic movie about a lawyer, it'd just be a person reading for 6 years of their life. So it's like, no, we're trying to tell stories here. I know that you don't do these big speechifying, grandstandy sort of moments. I know it's a different deal, but so anyway, we digress. So Steve, actually speaking though of younger filmmakers, right? Let's talk about the circumstances where you've been on set with people who maybe they knew enough to ask you to come help out, right? But let's walk through some of the easy mistakes that people have made over your career that you wish you could kind of tell new filmmakers listening at home.
One of the big ones is this was a thesis film that I worked on, and it's basically, I would say, for people listening, what my job was to do the same thing that you would do on a big budget thing, which is to help them break down the script. So you read the script, you break it down, like this section seems like it's a little stunty. What do you have planned here? Sometimes, and some scripts are very specific. The fight is written out exactly what they want. And some it's just like fight ensues, So there you could have one or the other.
And I'm sure there's times when like someone's like, Molly walks down, she looks away and trips over something. Like sometimes there's things that actually are stunts that people don't even realize are stunts. Right.
Yeah. When you said things that look stunty, that's one of the things that you would classify as quote unquote stunty.
Yeah, absolutely. Like someone is going to trip and fall over a table. It could be very simple. It's like, even when I wrote to you guys in the email, I said, it's what's interesting to me is not, the big action sequences are interesting, but it's the little things that people don't realize is actually a stunt. So like with regard to that thesis film I was telling you about, and this happened in others, but in this one particularly, the writer had written out exactly the kind of fight that he wanted. But, sometimes, like, this kind of comes back to what Oren was saying and not knowing about the medical stuff. Like he wrote out a fight kind of based on how he visualized maybe cool things that he saw on other productions, and then you kind of have to have that conversation. Well, like, that is kind of not possible. Like, what you're writing is not really possible, but you have to do it in a way that supports them, that like, hey, I think I understand, like, let's put the script down and just tell me in your own words, like, what you're seeing happen here, like in your brain. Just talk to me about it. Don't read what you wrote on the page. And usually that'll help them kind of solidify a little bit more what they want. And then you can kind of come back and say, hey, well, you see this part that you wrote, this would really work well in there, but this kind of move doesn't connect with that kind of move. So let's figure out a way to tell the story that you want to tell and build some choreography around it.
So let's break that down, though, a little bit more. So when you say the things that were written weren't possible, do you mean from a choreography perspective? It's just that, like, those moves don't make sense in sequence, or that the water bottles don't actually explode in offices or something?
No,
is it
more often than not, it's about what they want a human being to do that may not be possible for a variety of reasons. It could be just because it's not possible. Like, a person can't do a front flip and then land in what you want them to land in, or something like that. But it could also just be a matter of budget, which is another conversation you have. Like they might have a really great idea for an action sequence, and then you have to have that scene is going to take 3 qualified stunt drivers, and you're going to have to rent 3 cars, and then you're going to have to hire you're going to have an ambulance on set, and like you start explaining like what that costs, and then again, it's your job is to not discourage them, but to help them tell whatever story it is. And so it's like, so how can we cheat this? How can we do this with 1 car? How can we do this where the car's not even driving with wipes or something like that? And so a lot of it is just kind of helping directors coming out of school, or maybe they never went to school, they're DIY folks, just kind of understand like how to tell the story in a way that they can get it accomplished.
Yeah. It's funny. You're making me think about, there is a very particular moment in a young filmmaker's career that's similar. Like thesis films are the perfect example, where like you've got enough skill and enough resources to get together a crew of talented people, but then they're talented enough to tell you, oh, you need more. Your XYZ things are the things that you actually need. We see and know how to like execute the vision that you have in your head, and we still have more to go to get there, basically.
And it's kind of like what you said before, Matt, about being confident to hand over the reins a little bit. Like I've worked with a couple of directors coming out of film school, their thesis films, that were very comfortable doing that, and then the flip side, I've had ones that want to control everything. Like one of the biggest mistakes that I feel they make, especially when it comes to choreography, and it doesn't even have to be fighting. It could be, let's say I worked on a thesis film where there was tactical work, where it's like a SWAT team, coming in. And this kind of goes back to what you're saying. Like I had a meeting with the director. We went through who they could cast. Like originally it was like, I would like to cast stunt people who know how to handle weapons. Right. And we went through a database that I use. There's tons of these databases where you can find stunt.
Oh, that's interesting. Like a stunt performer.
Yeah. The one that's really popular here in the East Coast in New York, tri-state area, is called Stunt Listing, but it has performers from all over the United States. I think it's becoming one of the top ones, but there are several, and a lot of them are very specific to region. So there's like Stunt Phone, which is a little bit more like Atlanta based, and then out by you guys, there's one called Stunt Players. So there's several of these, and if any of your listeners want to shoot me a private message or email, I can hook them up, and if they're looking for somebody in a different region or something. But I sat with the director, and we went through casting, selected a bunch of guys, and the guys had all agreed to work for like the ultra low budget rate, and because it was just, for fun, and in the end, it came down to money, and he didn't want to pay that. And so he got, I don't know, he got 4 other actors that had, when I showed up, what I was going to say is that we had 2 rehearsal days scheduled, one for the tactical guys and one for this fight that had to happen. And then he canceled the rehearsal days. And, I'm trying to explain to him, listen, 1 rehearsal day is going to save you a lot of time on set. Like you may feel like right now, 1 day of rehearsal is a lot of time. But when you're on set and you want to get stuff done, and the closer it is to plug and play that day is going to save you time on set, which is much more important than, catering to without sounding too judgmental, to an actor who doesn't want to come to a rehearsal day, So I think that's a big one, is like the rehearsal days are important.
That's funny. That's also a thing where like the more experienced an actor is, the more invested they tend to be in that sort of prep work, whether that's, rehearsing stunts and things like that, or driving, or, accents, or like, great actors put in the time. And I think, again, younger ones that maybe don't realize what it takes necessarily, look at Tom Cruise, right?
Oh, well, if we could all be, I mean, yeah. I would love to live that lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I've done, most of the stunts I've done were like, let's learn them on set. And you just never get anything like a really great choreographed fight if you're
nothing special.
making it up on the spot, you know? And I always look back at those scenes. I'm like, I wish there were like 5 times as many, you know, like
gags,
parts to this sequence. It's like happens so fast. And I remember on the day we're like running behind, and then it's like, okay, punch here, punch in, and this punch looks kind of fake, but we just don't really have a lot of time to get this perfect. And, you know, so it's like that rehearsal day is just so valuable.
It's super important. And you don't get it a lot in television. You know, I mean, that's just the reality because they're doing show after show, week after week, and you don't have a lot of rehearsal. But you can.
Did you have it for Devs? Or was Devs a fight?
There was a fight in Devs. That's actually how I got that job. Was so Zach Grenier, who plays the security chief in Devs, I doubled him on Ray Donovan when they were shooting here in New York. So during season 6 of Ray Donovan, the stunt coordinator, Doc Duhame, who is like a veteran guy and also like a lot of, you know, his son is in the business, and it's like there's a whole family thing there. His son, Zach, is Brad Pitt's double in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But in any event, so Doc came up to me and said, hey, Zach, it needs to learn some fighting for this show that he's booked on. It turned out to be Devs. So Zach spoke to me, and then he was leaving for LA like in 4 weeks. So he came and trained with me for 4 weeks at the gym. We didn't really know exactly what was going to be asked of him, you know, but he did have the sides, which he couldn't share with me because of confidentiality stuff, but he kind of verbally explained as best as he could remember what was in the sides. And so a big part of my job was just to kind of put him through some basic training to see what his capabilities were, you know. And at that point I hadn't gotten the job on Devs. I was just kind of training him. But then what I did was, once he told me the sides, I shot a previs for him with my partner and another friend of mine who's a cameraman, with the intent of like, here's something, what it might look like. We found a location, we shot the previs. Here, this is for you. But my hope was that it would get to the stunt coordinator, right? And
when you shoot that, are you shooting it to look cool, or are you shooting it to be extremely clear for him to learn? Like, is it one wide shot, or is it like, now from behind this angle, it looks like this punch looks like it?
I think we only did like 2 cuts in the whole thing. It wasn't a oneer, but you know, it was very minimal.
But the point is, it's for reference, basically. Like, here is the choreography. If you need to brush up on anything that we've done here, pull this out on your phone, and you'll see.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
But the secondary motive was hopefully to get myself a job, right? So then Kathy Jarvis was the U.S. unit stunt coordinator for that show. And another friend of mine had said, oh, she's looking for a double for Zach. So I emailed her, and then I told her
he's bald, right?
Yeah, he's on The Good Wife, I think. And
so did you have to shave your head and stuff for that?
I did do that, yeah. I did it on Ray Donovan. I did it on Devs too. But
I suppose as like a tough guy, that's a part of the job. Sometimes you gotta shave your head, I suppose, right?
Yeah. Well, on Ray Donovan, I got a little bump for it on my paycheck. But you know,
of all the stunt bumps, shaving your head sounds like the safest. So
well, you know, but the thing is, they know because for the season I was doubling Eddie Marson, right? So shaving my head could interfere with getting work, you know. So they recognized that, which is very nice of them. Like, I didn't expect it at all. But in any event, I wrote to Kathy and said, hey, I double Zach. If you're looking for someone, you know. And she called me back, and then she and I chatted, and then I told her that I was training him, that I doubled him on Ray Donovan, and then I actually had footage of him training, so which she really appreciated. So I sent her some footage so she could see his abilities, and then she saw us together. She's like, oh, you're a perfect double for him. And then she's like, yeah, she's like, he has to do this fight scene, you know? And I'm like, oh, really? You mean the one, you know, between the 2 cars and blah, blah, blah? And she's like, yeah. And I said, oh, we shot a little previs. So I sent it to her. She loved it. And she's like, this is a great starting point. And then she's like, can I send it to Alex Garland to look at? And I'm like, oh, what am I going to say? No? You know, it's like, so anyway, I ended up...
Right, and that's the director/creator of Devs.
Yeah. So she ended up saying that I was hired, pending his approval. And and how did I feel about heights? Was I afraid of heights? Because I don't know if saw the show, but there's a scene where he has to go out on a ledge and stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was like,
That's you?
Yeah, that's me.
Wait, is that real?
It is greatly CGI, and there's a few little clips in there that's me, and like the drone shots are us, the stunt doubles. But we spent 2 days with a giant scaffold built up to that ledge for Sonia Mizuno and him to do the scene, and then spent 2 days literally learning how to mimic him, exactly how he walked on a ledge, exactly how he climbs over the rail. Like you have to really learn how to be that person. And then we doubled as safety. It's kind of like utility stunts that we were talking about. We were holding the mats because if they fell, they were going to fall 4 feet onto an 8-inch pad. If we fell, we were on a wire. So we did 2 days shooting the scene with them. Then they removed the scaffold, and another 2 days shooting the scene. We did everything, the dialogue, everything, exactly as they did.
What I love about that story, though, and I think the thing that maybe listeners at home who aren't stunt performers can take home is that, every different person is hustling in their own way. And like doing that homework is the way that you kind of can prove yourself to other filmmakers. You were the easy yes for everyone in the decision-making chain. Like, oh, here's tangible footage. He already has a great relationship. We've worked with him before. He knows the material. All of that stuff just makes it like, oh yeah, it would be a bigger pain in the butt to not hire you, right? And so the more that you can think ahead and predict what your potential jobs could be and who you want to hire you, like the better you can kind of plan for success in that way.
And I would add that it's important to do that even if you don't get the job, right? Because there was so many important things that I learned doing that with Zach, training him, shooting the previs, even if the previs went nowhere, that's all experience of shooting more video, and like my very first interview with Chad Stahelski from John Wick, and we were talking and he was interviewing me about the job. He said, if you want to be a really good stunt performer, you must learn how to edit. You have to learn how to edit. You have to learn how to shoot. You have to have basic understanding of lenses, and you have to know how to edit. And that's just, isn't it so much easier if on set the DP and the camera op are deciding what lens, and I can know based on, oh, it's a 40 mil or 60 mil or like whatever. I can know like, okay, this is going to be tight. This is going to be wide. You're only going to see my face. And then knowing how to edit makes it easier for me to perform for the camera because I know what they're going to be looking at later. So like at our stunt group, like what we every week up until the pandemic, of course, but we would meet every week and we would shoot a fight a week. And there's about 8 of us that train together, and every week somebody else is responsible for shooting and editing the fight. And they never see the light of day.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
If, say, there were New York filmmakers who wanted to maybe contribute in some way or help out, is that something that you guys do? Are you interested in building those relationships? Do you want...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. It's all about the community. It's not about staying within your stunt bubble, And
that's what do you know those guys like the Corridor Digital guys and Freddie Wong, there's like these YouTubers that basically befriended these various stunt groups and stunt teams, and I think they were featuring them and kind of promoting them, and they were working on their things, and I think they kind of shot to YouTube fame because their stuff, they had these professional stuntmen, making YouTube videos with them. And Matt, I think that's like a real interesting idea. Like people, like New York filmmakers, like a DP, a director, or someone, an actor wants to go help you guys out with some shooting, and then just you learn a lot. And I had this dumb idea where it's like, if you guys shoot a fight sequence every week, like you could almost make like a database of those. If someone's like, okay, and then fight ensues, like they could be like, ooh, maybe I can use their fight, this fight, let's use fight number 7 from the Koepfer Chronicles.
We absolutely do keep them all, like it's all reference material. But again, during normal times, we do a lot of workshops and trainings for actors, for stunt performers that are even more rookie than I am, and for anybody, I'm kind of like, you want to be part of the filmmaking community in the city, but you also have to be choosy too. There's definitely like a fine line, but it's definitely something that we do. I don't have a problem working on, for example, like thesis films and things like that. I don't have a problem with it. I don't really care. I don't want to say I don't care about the money, but I understand the situation, and I like the creative environment.
Right. And like all filmmaking, I think every department is like, it has its own ecosystem. And so being able to work on different sized projects, you can refer people, you can help each other out, you can, volunteer on other people's sets. There's a lot of different ways to grow your network while helping out new
Absolutely.
younger filmmakers.
And then it just makes your Rolodex that much stronger. It's like the DP for that short that I told you about that got me into Darren Aronofsky's office. His name is Charles Pokel. I don't know if you guys know him, but he did a movie called Christmas Again. It was an Independent Spirit nominee, and it was a Sundance nominee, and you should check it out. It's on Netflix now. But he hadn't finished that yet, but now he's, like it's often
now
not
he's
often.
fancy pants.
Yeah, now he's fancy pants. But it's like the point is like as we move on in our careers, like maybe the phone. He was working on a current project, and the phone rang, and it was him. He's like, "Hey, I got a scene where a guy gets choked unconscious, right? So like, what are the realistic things that happen when, because of all my years in mixed martial arts, I've seen a lot of people getting choked out, and so I can explain to him, well, this might happen. I've seen this happen. I've seen this happen, and the same with, I mentioned in my email to you guys, her name is Jacqueline Dao. She was a NYU student. I worked on her thesis film, which was a pilot, and it was just so good. And, it got her she was a finalist in the HBO Directors Fellowship, right? And it wasn't a big stunt. It was literally to help teach an actor how to fall and get tackled safely and make sure the set was safe for that guy. But now we have a relationship. So now she's moved on and she's brought me in to do some other things, and it goes back to like, your comment about up and coming directors not knowing what they could do, like I worked on this proof of concept with her for HBO. It was the first time she ever worked with a stunt double. I helped her cast a stunt double for a 12-year-old girl who had to fall on the stairs, right? And after it was over,
can I ask how old the stunt double was?
Oh, she was like
an adult?
Yeah, mid-20s, but a really good double. And there's about 4 or 5 small women in the New York area that get all the kid double jobs.
I knew out here a gymnast turned stunt performer who was quite petite and was like Alice in the Alice in Wonderland movie for basically 80% of the shots,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But she worked with the stunt double, and after we were done, she's like, I can't believe, like, I got to do so much more than I thought I was going to be able to do because of the abilities of the stunt performer and falling on the stairs and all that, where she thought she could only go this far with 12-year-old girl, and then she got an adult who's trained, and then she was like, oh my god, this scene just ended up so much better than I expected. She's like, her words were, it's a new tool in my toolbox that I never knew that I had.
Well, speaking of that, I know I have to wrap up soon, but I had 2 topics I wanted to touch on super quick. I think the first one might be a quick answer, but they're both for kind of newer directors or directors that haven't worked with stunts much or are trying to work with limited budgets. First question is, let's say I want to make a short film. I'm self-financing it. I don't have a ton of money, but I do have a fight sequence in it, and I do want someone to fall and break a table or something a little exciting like that. What's the first step for me to find a person to talk to about this? Let's say I don't live in LA or New York.
Okay, so I would say even if you don't live in LA or New York, you could go to Stunt Listing, or you can go to Stunt Players or Stunt Phone. Those are the big 3. There's also iStunt. There's another one that's really specific to New York called CMG. But you go to one of these databases, and on all of them you can search by skill, and you can search by what people can do. You can search by height, weight. It's basically for casting. You'll get their resume because we don't have agents. It's like we're just out there, kind of word of mouth. That's the hard part about
right.
FAP.
But you are all SAG, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, most of the databases will also indicate whether someone's union or SAG eligible or non-union.
Right. But so if I'm looking not for someone to fall, but for someone to tell me if I can even do this thing, more like someone to read the script and, tell me what on if
what's
what I want to do
stunty
is
and what
doable.
isn't. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I would say still go there and find someone, even if you may not work with them, and just reach out to them and say, hey, I mean, that's how that's how most of the student filmmakers that have reached me, or the new filmmakers that have found me. Like, I just worked on a short film. It's the one real job that I did this year, and the person just Googled stunts in New York and happened to find me and called and just was very honest. It was like, hey, I've got this short we're working on and we need a fight and we need, is most of us performers, I think, will be very glad to help you and point you in directions, like even I told them, I said, look, this is what you would need to do. This is the current COVID requirements. This is like what you would need for insurance. This is what you would need for XYZ. If I'm your guy, awesome. If I'm not your guy, that's cool too. But these are the kinds of things that you would need. So I would say just don't be afraid to reach out. Just out.
Just to get nitty gritty about it, at what point do I need to spend money to is it?
Yeah. Well, I think once you nail somebody down that is going to work for you, let's say if it was you calling me and we kind of gelled and there was a good vibe there and you liked my energy and the way that I seem to break things down for you, then it's like, okay, I want to hire you, and so you have to have the talk turkey moment, like what will it cost to hire you,
And do you usually have like a flat rate or a day rate or the SAG rate? Like how do you
if it's
prep time, all that stuff?
Yeah. I mean, everybody's gonna be different. If it's a SAG production, that is kind of established. I don't want to advocate other things, but there's other things you can do to get around that. Like you can negotiate. Like even the SAG contracts give you permission to negotiate a better rate.
Right. Well, the ultra low budget is right. You can't.
Yeah,
you can pay someone like $125 a day or something.
Yeah, and you can do deferred.
SAG performers, I think.
Payment.
Yeah, the stunt performers, I think, are maybe under a slightly different. I think stunts
a little higher.
A stunt performer you can defer, but a stunt coordinator you can't. Like a department head gets paid.
I guess the thing that I always run into, and Matt, I'm sure you've run into this too, is like you want to do some sort of wire work. You want to do that. You have a comedy bit and you want to do that cliche thing where someone SWAT team comes in through the ceiling, right, on the wire. And then the producer's like, yeah, that's way too expensive. There's no way we can afford to do that. Is that way too expensive? Like, is it super expensive to get trusses and rig people and have someone come down?
Well, I mean, super expensive is kind of a relative term, but I mean, if you want to do that, look, let's say you called me and you wanted to do that. I know several riggers that I would refer you to, that I could refer you to, and they would tell you.
They usually own the gear too.
Most of them do, most of the veteran guys do, and sometimes you might have to rent the truss, but most of the guys own their own, tech line and harnesses and all the stuff that you would need. And they'll break it down for you. Like, hey, look, let's talk about the stunt, because they all want to work. It's not like everybody wants to work. So they're going to try and give you a rate that is doable for you, but also doable for them. But there will come a point where if it's too low, it's going to be like, well, you can't really do all of this, But a good coordinator might, like I said before, they might help you figure out a way to do what you want in a way that you didn't consider. That you can still tell the story.
They're like, you could just really call the SWAT team, tell them there's a bomb. As they...
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's important to talk to them. I mean, it's, even if you don't hire them, just there are always things. I'll give you an example. I worked with another thesis film from another university in New Jersey. And they had a fight. And they had all the young actors in this thesis film. And one of the things that I do that is not commonplace in the industry at all, but I do it on every student film that I work on. I do it, and it's basically I imported this from my life as a combat sports event supervisor and organizer. Is I give anybody doing the stunts essentially a quick medical intake. Like, have you ever had a concussion? Do you have any allergies? I'm basically doing what the ambulance driver would do. I'm doing it in advance. I'm just doing a quick rundown. Like, if it's, do you have sickle cell? like sickle cell disease, for example, is the number one non-traumatic killer of football players, college football players, and it's predominantly African Americans. So like, there's all these questions you want to ask. Like, do you have asthma? Yes. Okay, you got to make sure we have your inhaler when you're on set. Like, if you're in the middle of an asthma attack, like, you're not going to be able to tell us where you're inhaling. So all these basic things. So on this thesis film, the last question I ask is always, is there something, if we have to call an ambulance, like, what do you need to tell them? What do they need to know? And this particular actor had thalassemia, which is a bleeding disorder, right? It's if they took a really hard hit, even by accident, they could be internally bleeding and die tomorrow, and you would never know, And the only reason we knew was because I give this intake, So one of the things I always tell people, if you're going to have anybody doing anything physical, I mean, I think it's a good idea for anybody on set, but if anybody doing anything physical, you should kind of get that information. So she got clearance from her doctor. I said, listen, I'm not going to let you do this scene until your doctor says you're cleared for like light contact sports, And she got the clearance from her doctor, did the scene, everything was cool. Coming from combat sports and moving into film, in combat sports where everything is so tightly organized with regard to safety, not just one ambulance, but two ambulances at every event, and all these kinds of things. And then everybody, all the pre-medical testing and everything that you have to do as an athlete. I'm not saying that needs to be done for every stunt performer. Like, if you're doubling Brian Cox because he doesn't want a water balloon thrown in his face on Succession, like, I don't know if you need to get an MRI, you know what I mean? But it's like a basic questionnaire that could be on file is important with like your emergency contact, things like that.
Yeah, I love that so much. It's interesting because I think that, again, just kind of opening up people's minds about what it is to perform stunts and to coordinate stunts. There is a producer brain as part of it as well. There's a lot of different disciplines going on. But going back to Oren, your point about like us being in circumstances where we really want us to have a stunt and your producer says no or whatever. To me, it kind of feels like a version of any other request. It's just that you and I have less experience and therefore a lighter Rolodex, right? Like,
right.
If
but
you,
also
if
someone
you
could
say,
tell
hey,
me that it cost $1,000 or $100,000. Like, I literally
right.
have
you have no
idea.
idea. Exactly. But if you're like, hold on, let me just text my guy Steve, in the same way, if I want a technocrane, I know approximately how much that is, and I know a couple people who could come in for a half day, and because they know it's me asking, they cut you a rate because they know that I'm going to come back to them a bunch of times or whatever it is, whatever the piece of gear is. And so I think that maybe the other big takeaway from this episode is just kind of like getting to know all of your different craftspeople and building relationships with them so that when you get hit up by a producer who's like, hey, I need a great stunt performer or a great rigger or a great coordinator. Do you know anyone? You have a couple people you can call,
Yeah, and it's the example you gave, Oren, like some rappelling, right? Some fast roping, and like, you may not need a truss and a whole setup. You might need just a scissor lift and a licensed scissor lift operator, just to get high enough out of frame so you can, you might not need everything you think you need.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's kind of something I really love talking about on this podcast is like how much things actually cost, because as a young filmmaker, I was always just really intimidated by, oh, that's a TV show. They have millions of dollars. If they have a translate, there's no way I could get a translate. And then you're like, oh, actually, for $1,500, you can get a custom translate or whatever. You're like, oh, that's actually in my budget, my Kickstarter budget, And so we had Michael Gallagher, a director, on. He told us he got billboards all around the city. To me, you don't do that unless you're Universal Studios. But he's like, oh, no, I called Clear Channel, for $4,000. I got 20 bus benches.
Even better, though, because I love this anecdote so much. He didn't know the name Clear Channel. He just looked at billboards and saw, oh, okay, Clear Channel is what all of these billboards say. That must be the company. And then called them and then taught himself all of the jargon that he needed to know to understand what it was that he was even asking. Like, it's such a great example of how filmmaking works. It's just kind of like, look at it and figure it out and call people.
Yeah,
it,
absolutely. Like
basically.
most stunt coordinators, like veteran stunt coordinators, like if you call, say, Stunts Unlimited, or that's like one of the big ones out by you guys in LA, and you may get a top-notch veteran coordinator on the phone who may not want to do it himself, but may have a protege, have somebody who he would pass the work on to that is capable of doing what you need, or somebody that he's grooming, or it's. I always say, what's the worst thing that can happen? It's like, reach out, and if they don't talk to you, they don't talk to you, But I think most of the time, I've found, at least, the stunt community is they circle the wagons a lot, and part of that has to do with the safety nature of things, keeping things safe. But I've also found every single person I've ever worked with to be really giving and open if you ask questions, and because they want to, in the end, they're creative people too, and they want to see great stuff succeed, and they know if they build a great relationship with you, that could mean future work.
Love it. Well, Oren, did you have one other topic you wanted to jump into?
No, that was it. Basically, how much does rappelling or getting hit by a car cost? Because honestly, I want to make this short, and it seems to me that there needs to be a really nice fight, like a really good fight sequence in it, and I'm trying to figure out my way out of it so I don't have to do the fight sequence. But like, honestly, just talking to you, it's like, maybe I could do a good fight sequence on a shoestring budget.
Call the guys up. Yeah. You've revealed the other secret to the show, Steve, is that it's we have
Matt
guests on based off of we're trying to figure out who who do we need to meet next.
But to your question about cost, though, there is variability, right? So like, you have, obviously, like if it's a SAG thing, you have the SAG rate. Then there's the stunt adjustment, and then therein lies the latitude, So the better question might not be, what does this cost? The better question, to be honest with the person, and say, hey, look, this is what I've got to spend. What can I do? Like, where can we shift this budget around? Like, if there's a fight scene, can we hire 2 guys as opposed to 4 guys? And this is the conversation I had with the filmmaker that had the tactical scene. I'm like, well, do you really need 4 guys, for this scene? Can you do it with 3? Can you do it with 2? I mean, and particularly for that scene, because it was like it was shot floor level, so you were just seeing their legs as they were coming into the room that they were clearing. Like, you could literally have
3 guys and 4 pairs of pants.
Exactly. You could have just doubled people
One
up.
guy and a green screen.
Yeah. The other thing that, Steve, I think that you brought up that I think is worth really highlighting is that as a negotiation tactic, you're not maybe going to get the cheapest price by saying this is what my budget is, but you build so much trust and goodwill with people who potentially they're certainly putting their health on the line, if not their lives on the line. And so being transparent of like, this is how much I have to work with, means that you're a team player that can then collaborate with someone to find the right solution, rather than, if I was like, Steve, how much would it cost for you to get hit by a car? Is $50 enough? That you're just off on the wrong foot. Even if you say yes, the saving however much money the difference would be is going to hurt you in the long run.
Well, cool. Well, thanks so much for chatting with us and for emailing us and for,
it was great, man. I loved it.
Reaching out.
It's great to see you guys in person now. It's just like
it's weird, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Matt wants it to be weird. I don't think it's that. I wish it was weird, but
and every time I see you in person, I'm like, huh? Oh, yeah. Right. I keep forgetting.
One time I was at Intelligentsia here in Silver Lake, the coffee shop, and some guy was like, hey, are you Oren Kaplan from Just Shoot It? And I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, I've seen you here many times. I was like, oh, why is this the first time you talked to me? He's like, I don't know. It's kind of weird for me to just walk up to you. Yeah, I know you. You don't know me. And I'm like, no, please walk up to me. Like, you have no idea how happy it makes me to text Matt and say, hey, someone recognized me, and him to say, nobody ever recognized me.
No one ever recognized. I look like everybody.
The great joy in my life is making Matt feel like people, like I'm the more famous of the podcast hosts.
Yeah, Oren's the popular one. Thanks, everyone.
No, I'm just kidding. But cool. Are you down to stick with us for an unpaid endorsement?
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Unpaid endorsements.
Okay, I have one. It has almost nothing to do with stunts, but it is kind of amazing. It's we did talk about editing, so it's kind of related to editing, but in Adobe Premiere Pro, the 2020, whatever, I guess everyone that is using Adobe Premiere nowadays is on the latest version. There's this essential sound panel, right? You go to Window, Essential Sound, and it lets you kind of tweak your dialogue and your various sound effects music. And it's always been okay. I've kind of used it. It's kind of like sound mixing for dummies, and it never worked that well. But they just added a new tab to it that lets you search for Adobe stock music. And you literally just click on it, and there's like thousands of music tracks, and you can just type like upbeat folk or like angry rock and roll or whatever. And it's like you don't even leave your editing application. Then you just get a list of tracks, and you can just like scroll through them. And if you hit play on them, it'll play your video with that music.
Cool. That's cool.
It's so awesome. And then if you like it, you just drag that track into the timeline.
How does licensing work with that stuff?
So it's interesting. There's no watermark or anything. You can use it as much as you want in Premiere. But if you try to export it, it tells you, just so you know, this is not licensed. So we're exporting like a low quality version of the music. If you want to use it for anything commercial, you have to license it. And you can do that by right clicking on the track and just say, license this track. I mean, it's so easy. I actually,
but you have to pay for the track in some way,
yes,
right?
I have Premiere open right now. I'm going to right click on it. Oh, so you can download 10 songs a month for $30 a month. The first month is free, so you can get 10 if you're working on something right now. Oh, that's for an annual subscription. If you have a monthly subscription, then you get 3 assets a month, and it's $30 a month. Cancel anytime. But your assets roll over, so you get like 36 a year. So that's if you want like a thing. And right, if I would have clicked confirm right now, it would have automatically charged me because I'm already in the system. But it seems pretty inexpensive. I mean, it's kind of nuts how easy it is, because you don't even have to go. Usually you go to Music Library, you look for stuff, you hit play, you download all these things. There's watermarks. Your client's like, why does it keep saying
premiumbeats.com? Yeah.
So anyway, it's really cool. Check it out.
That's pretty great. Steve, what you got, sir?
I got, this is something I use all the time, and people ask me all the time, what do I use to rip footage for reels and things like that? So I use, my all-time favorite is OBS Studio, and I don't know if you guys use it. It's called Open Broadcast Studio. It's open source.
But most people use it for like
streaming. Yeah, like Twitch streaming.
For Twitch and stuff. But it is, I've never been blocked by any source or service, streaming service or anything. I never get, the black screen where you get the black screen and just the audio.
Oh, so this is especially good if you're trying to get something off of Netflix or something like that.
Yep.
For educational or private use.
Or for your reel.
Well, reels are
your actual
fair use, right? Reels are fair use. I actually just...
Wait, so if you wanted to pull a scene from devs, you go to a web browser and then you use OBS to record the screen, or can you actually record the video itself?
So you can do either. You can record directly, so you have different options. You have about 6 or 7 different options in how you can just do screen capture. You could do window capture only. You can actually do it where I think it's essentially like OBS functions as your browser. So you take the web address and plug it in, and then it plays from there. And you can choose what export format you want. I mean, it's just so good.
And it looks good. It gets like the 24 frames, 30 frames, whatever per second.
Everything you saw in my reel was ripped from there. And I've never had a problem with it. Sometimes, I use it in combination with Firefox, because some of the other browsers collaborate in blocking of footage. So Firefox, OBS, that's my go-to formula for getting your
cocktail.
Yes,
that's pretty good. Those are 2 very handy, practical unpaid endorsements. And I'm going to follow up with one.
Comforter.
I do like my comforter, but that's not what I'm really going to recommend. I'm going to recommend a video essay by our favorite Tony Zhu, but he did it for Filmstruck, not for Every Frame a Painting. He's done a handful of those out there with Filmstruck, RIP, but the YouTube channel and is still around. So the video essay I'm recommending specifically is Howard Hawks and the Art of the Screwball Comedy. I recently rewatched Hudsucker Proxy, which is like a His Girl Friday homage pretty explicitly. So that's Coen Brothers, but Howard Hawks did His Girl Friday, Ball of Fire, a lot of like Bringing a Baby, like the classic fast talking, movies from back then that the Coens were so inspired by. And what's great about this one specifically is that they show an example of how Hawks does framing and composition to make things snappier and more chaotic and funny. And then they show a similar film also based off of the stage play that His Girl Friday is based off of, and show you how blocking can make something really flat. And so it's got entertaining and interesting and like makes you want to watch 1,000 movies after you've seen the video essay, but also has very practical knowledge baked in there as well. So Howard Hawks and the Art of the Screwball Comedy is my recommendation. It's on Filmstruck.
Oh, awesome. I think I've read that book, Hawks on Hawks, or at least I've seen it on many shelves. That's cool. I will check it out. I'm a huge Tony Zhu fan.
Well, Howard Hawks is he's the bee's knees. You get me? So, well, guys, this was great. Steve, where can people learn more about you, what you do, and reach out to you in this case as well?
Yeah, basically on all social media, Sambo Steve, one word. Sambo the martial art.
SAMBO.
Yep, SAMBO Steve. Like on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, pretty much everywhere.
Perfect. Nice and clean.
Yeah. Facebook, my name,
There you go. Well, Steve, we can't wait to see you get punched and fall down many times in the future.
Me too.
Safely,
exactly. And coordinate
wearing a mask.
People getting punched.
Well,
as well.
80% safe. 80% safe.
Yeah. But if you want to learn about all the things that we talked about, you can check out justshootitpod.com for links to the things that we have brought up on the show. You can follow us across all social media at Just Shoot It Pod. And you can follow me personally at Mr. Matt Unlow on Instagram and Twitter.
You can follow me on Instagram. I'm at OKaplan. On Twitter, I'm at SmiteyPyleg. And you can email us. We love to hear from you. It's justshootitpod@gmail.com. This episode was edited by Sarah Weirda. Our webmaster is Ewan Williams. And our social media maestro is Derek Aiello. And you're listening to music from the Free Music Archive and the artist Jahzzar. And we will catch you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.